And before we get into that and what might be coming next, can you give us your kind of general sense, your general reaction to this news that Trudeau's resigning?
Sure. I mean, I think by the time it actually happened, I don't think it was particularly surprising. Although I think if you'd asked me as recently as, uh, you know, like late last month, like if you'd asked me around Christmas time, I would have said, I think he'll probably stay and fight it out. I mean,
Hmm.
the window for him to leave and not completely fuck over the Liberal Party electorally was like maybe a year ago. His unpopularity is not something that's happened suddenly. I mean, it's particularly bad right now. There was a poll last week where the Liberals hit 16% nationally, which, I mean, if they actually got that in a federal election, they might lose official party status. They might be down to just a few seats. Um, but Trudeau's own approval ratings and the Liberals polling margins with the Conservatives have been really bad for a long time. It's been very clear that Trudeau should go, and he's incessantly insisted that he should stay. I think there are actually a lot of parallels with the experience your country had with Joe Biden, not just in the sense of a kind of centrist political leader, albeit in this case a much younger one, trying to kind of cling to power past his best before date, but also in kind of the reasons for that. I think, Trudeau, like Biden, was someone who was convinced that, the problem, like the reason for his unpopularity is sort of like it's morale. It's like
Hmm.
people are not perceiving reality correctly. And once they understand that actually, the economy's great, etc. People will come back to the Liberal Party. That was wrong in the case of Biden, and it was wrong here. So Trudeau going by the act, by yesterday, by the actual day it happened, was not a surprise. But I think kind of taking a medium term view of it, I actually am kind of surprised by it because he seemed absolutely determined to stay. And it's not as if like there's not a formal mechanism. There was no formal mechanism by which he was forced out. It's literally just his popularity become going so low that his own MPs were calling him to go in quite large numbers.
How significant was the sort of precipitating event, which is like Chrystia Freeland, right, who was finance minister, stepping down in part, because of apprehension over Trump's tariff threats?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you're looking for a kind of accelerant in the last, couple of months, that really is, to all of this. I mean, I think that really is it. It wasn't just the fact that she resigned; it was the particular way that she
Hmm.
did it. I think it was on December the 16th. The government was scheduled to table its fall fiscal update, which is a sort of pre-budget. And most people don't, even in Canada, don't really follow that. But in parliamentary terms, it's quite significant. The government actually can't continue unless it wins the confidence of the House of Commons on that vote. And she was set to deliver it on behalf of the government as finance minister, and she tendered her resignation that very morning. So for that whole day, it wasn't clear. Like Canada's a G7 country, no one know who the finance minister was. So it was pretty, as kind of political spectacle, it was pretty dramatic. Her own reasons for it was, the government is spending too much money, the deficit is too big, blah blah blah. I mean, it's a little rich given the central role she's played in the government for her to pretend she objects to anything that it's done. But I think people, understood very clearly, what was going on there. That she is an ambitious politician, did not want to remain attached to the Trudeau brand, and she wanted to, set herself up for a leadership run, which seems basically inevitable at this point.
Well, I mean, so I wanted to spend a little bit. I want to spend a little bit time on kind of Trudeau as a figure before we get into like what led to his resignation and all of that. You mentioned he has a similarity to Biden in the sense of him holding on to power probably for too long. But another familiar American touchstone is Obama, and Trudeau very much was seen as like the standard bearer of like the liberal order. Particularly during the Trump years. I mean, could you talk about his style as a politician?
Yeah, and honestly, I think the two. I think that's all. That's all very apt, and I think the two of the key reference points for understanding Trudeau, particularly his initial popularity. His kind of period of popularity was the fall of 2015 when he won the federal election. Really, I would say through into 2017. After Trump was inaugurated, that was really like the golden age of Trudeau, and that's where the international media, in particular, was paying a lot of attention to him. And I think, as a politician, he's very much kind of working within the world that someone like Barack Obama has created. This kind of world where you win elections with these like I don't know, kind of I don't know, these very personality based campaigns around charismatic figures or whatever, who are kind of walk this very fine line between being very safe and conventional, but sort of managing to seem like they're offering something that's new and different and having a sort of patina of novelty about them. That's what Obama did very successfully, and I think Trudeau very consciously saw himself in that mode. But as I
Mhm.
said, the other reference point that I think is crucial is Donald Trump. And in a sense, Trudeau got very lucky that Hillary Clinton lost the 2016 presidential election because he was able, I think, without exerting very much effort, to kind of position himself within Canada and internationally as, this kind of anti-Trumpian figure. And I
Mhm.
think most of the anti-Trump stuff was hot air. I don't think Trudeau was really providing much substantive resistance to Trump. But it didn't really matter. And Trudeau was able to sustain his image for a long time, really just on that basis. And actually, within Canada, because the international media doesn't really talk about us very much, because there was this international buzz around Trudeau, often, I think the Canadian media would sort of cover that, rather than covering like what was actually going on, like through a Canadian lens. And so, in some ways, Canadians for several years were being served like an image of their own country that was sort of coming from abroad and was quite idealized and didn't always reflect reality. So I think all of those things were part and parcel of Trudeau's success.
So on that, I mean, talking about his legacy, I'm curious what you wrote a really great book. People can listen to the conversation we've had on this program about it, called "The Dead Center." No, I'm curious about just seeing what you've seen in the United States with the election here. Terms like realignment, de-alignment. I mean, what role do you think Trudeau played in that kind of de-alignment or potential realignment in Canada? Do you think that's an apt comparison? Um,
It's complicated to, it's kind of an apples and oranges thing with Canada and the United States, because historically the party divide in Canada has had a lot more to do with questions of national unity, regional identity, things like that. Anglophone voters, Francophone
mhm,
voters, Quebec, the rest of Canada, the West. Obviously the American party system is it's traditionally operated around different axes. But having said that, I mean, all of the same, we have the same kinds of players here, and I would say all of the same processes have been largely underway. They're just operating under, in a different context. I guess part of the critical difference here is that we do also have a social democratic party.
mhm.
So, there is a third party that, you know, is offering a message that is not something that is usually available within the American mainstream, or if it is, it's associated with the squad or the left wing of the Democratic Party. So yeah, I think a granular comparison between the two countries would probably take some time and not be particularly interesting here.
Mm.
Before we get to Polyev, where are the Social Democrats, Jagmeet Singh, positioned right now?
I mean, in terms of the polling, they're slightly better than the average polling that the NDP has between elections. I mean, the NDP, given the current state of affairs with the Liberals being very unpopular, in theory, should be poised to do
Mhm.
quite well in the elections coming up. I do think, so the NDP had this agreement, this parliamentary agreement with the Liberals, where they agreed for several years to support the Liberals in exchange for certain concessions. So there was, expansion of dental coverage, anti-scab legislation in the public sector, various other things, a suite of fairly progressive reforms. And the NDP ended up pulling out of the deal in September, pulling out of it early. But I think the Conservatives in particular have really driven home the kind of, they've kept calling it a coalition agreement between the NDP and the Liberals. Um, it's not, but I think that association with Trudeau has continued to be something of a liability for the NDP, even if it's kind of an unfair one. Whether that will matter in an election that could happen, 3 to 6 months from now, I have no idea. It may not, and I'm still reasonably optimistic about the NDP's prospects in the election ahead.
That's interesting. I mean, just like kind of briefly, because we're going to have to talk about the Conservatives, I think a little bit more in depth. But I mean, how has Singh been recently in the way that he's sort of able to present himself to the Canadian working class? Because I do wonder. I mean, this is me, from as far away as you can get, Texas to Canada. He does seem to sort of suffer from some of the things that like a lot of progressives in the U.S. kind of suffer from in their ability to sort of do outreach with working class voters.
Well, I haven't seen, I haven't seen the data in the polling. I haven't seen a kind of a class breakdown or anything like that. Um, I mean, to date, the NDP has largely been able, even in elections where it hasn't done so well, to kind of hold on to pieces of its historic coalition, which is electorally quite a diverse one. It
Hmm.
spans kind of deindustrialized areas in southwestern Ontario, places like Windsor, automotive towns like that, and also kind of urban metropoles. Um, I think honestly, what's going to happen in the election ahead is anybody's guess. I think the NDP has I think the NDP platform in many ways is stronger than it's been,
Hmm.
in most of the elections, federal elections in my life anyway. Whether the extent that it'll be effective or catch on in the current environment, I'm not sure. I hope so, but I guess we'll see.